Hi, this is Joe Shannon. I'm a lawyer, a husband, a father of 6 kids, and I also host a podcast called Opening Statement with Joe Shannon. Please consider listening to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and any other folks that host podcasts. Just Google Joe Shannon and podcast, and you'll find it. I hope you enjoyed the show. We are so excited today. We have a really cool guest today, Patti Maguire Armstrong, all the way from North Dakota, who is an author, blogger. She's going to have her own podcast one day for sure. I know that. And just a really cool guest. So she's a mom of 10 kids. I think she's got about 11 grandkids, living out in the prairie there in North Dakota and making a huge difference in the lives of millions of Americans. Thank you so much for being here, Patti.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So tell me, Patti, introduce yourself to the audience here. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, outside of Detroit, in typical, for that era, Catholic school, Catholic neighborhood, nuns in habits. But by the time we graduated, hardly anybody was wearing habits anymore. The world changed dramatically. I graduated 1975. And then I went to Michigan State University, I actually started out at University of Detroit, took a year of journalism. So I want to talk about that later as we go on. I started out in journalism. I just loaded up on journalism classes, transferred to Michigan State University, and I had to work while I was in school. And if you're in journalism, you got to write. You can't just take classes if you want a job when you graduate. So I was writing, working for like a dorm paper, working school, and I just was tired and just thought, I think I'll switch to social work. I don't think I can handle all this, and I like social work too. And it turned out well because I went in the Peace Corps in the Marshall Islands, Micronesia. I met my husband there, came back, lived in Portland, Oregon for 3 years, and I got a master's in public administration. Then we became Jesuit volunteers, and we lived on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana. From there, we ran a group home for delinquent boys. And then we lived in Montana for 6 years. And then we moved here to Bismarck, North Dakota, which if anybody ever would have told me that one day, that would have been on my list of top 3 places I don't want to live, but we love it here. We've been here for 30 years, we have 10 kids, 8 of them are boys. I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of wear and tear on the house, let me tell you, because boys are active, which is fine with us for the most part. And 2 of those boys are from Kenya. They were AIDS orphans. First came Calvin, and 3 years later, his younger brother, Joash, joined us. And Calvin is now a medical doctor, married, expecting his 2nd child. And Joash was in the Marines, finished in the Marines, and he's working for the government and working on a master's in business right now. And wow. I want to say about Joash, when he left North Dakota, he had broken every cross-country record in the state, except for one, because they cheated, because their hometown boy, and I didn't know it, somebody else told me, they changed the course because their hometown boy had the record. And so some mother of one of the other runners was upset and said, they changed the course, so he have the title, but we don't care, whatever.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Joash because was a University of Portland pilot.
Yes, he was. Yeah, and that's how we kind of connected, because you ran cross country with his coach back in the day.
That's right. Yeah. So, but hey, listen, what a great, interesting journey you've had, Patti. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm one of 10 kids. And so I want to say my sister, Mary Jo, my brother, John, my sister, Kathleen, all were in the Jesuit volunteers as well.
Oh, so, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I know my sister, Mary Jo, ended up in Tacoma, Washington at Bellarmine High School. My sister, Kathleen, ended up in Lorain, Ohio. And then my brother, John, was up in Bethel, Alaska with some of the natives up there?
Those are all familiar sounding places. I knew that was kind of the Pacific Northwest area.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. And then one of the alums of Shannon Law Group, the law firm I run, was also in the Peace Corps and was in Armenia for 2 years.
Wow.
So all these
Okay.
places you guys were scattered to is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. And so we probably sound like, wow, they're maybe religious people or Jesuit volunteers, we're Peace Corps volunteers, but we weren't at all.
Yeah, right, exactly. So now you ended up in North Dakota. I mean, so right now, the last 2 or 3 months have been nonstop headlines about this virus that's been, the scourge of America. Tell me what's going on, how it's taking place in North Dakota. What's North Dakota like?
North Dakota is very different from some places. I have 6 siblings. I have a brother in Prague. We email daily, especially since this COVID stuff hit. And I have a 94-year-old dad in Michigan and a sister there. So we have Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Oregon, Oregon, Indiana, and Prague, and North Dakota. So we're always comparing notes. So I think North Dakota got off pretty easy. We shut down we closed the schools around, was it March 16th or March 17th? But we started having masses 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
And we're sitting every other pew. And my family and I have been getting into these big debates because hardly anybody, at Mass, hardly anybody's wearing masks. Bismarck, North Dakota, our area has very low numbers. Fargo is the one, my brother was joking me and he said, I think that you should have Fargo annexed onto Minnesota because they're ruining our numbers. They just keep going up and up. But we still have, our youngest son graduated from high school on Sunday. And only the parents could come. We were sit very far apart in the gym. We had assigned seating. The students sat on the floor. They didn't process in. They had the diplomas under their chairs. So their name was called and they held up their diploma. So, but then we went to open houses, and open houses are pretty much business as usual, which in some ways people get upset and go, well, you shouldn't be doing that. But there's not that much going on here. We have had, the only deaths we've had have been pretty elderly people, with most of them have had underlying conditions. So some of the stuff we're seeing on the news isn't really happening here.
Okay. And so, we're here in suburban Chicago, and so we're still in I would say a pretty serious lockdown. My law firm and our maintenance company have all been essential services, so it really hasn't affected us. But as far as the children go, they've been out of school. I had 2 college students that ended. We had one that graduated, or I guess graduated, but there's been no ceremony. And then they both came home. And then I had a high schooler that stopped, and then a grade schooler, and they're all doing the e-learning like we're doing right here, but it's a totally different experience. And I'm hopeful that we can get everybody back to school in the fall.
Well, our oldest finished his senior year online, and then we have a sophomore at University of North Dakota who finished his sophomore year online. We homeschooled for 19 years, but then my kids went to the Catholic high school, so it wasn't out of the realm. But I didn't have to be involved this time, so they just, wow. Which I was fine with.
That's great. So I want to talk to you about some of the, you raised 10 kids, but you are a prolific blogger, a prolific writer, and you just wrote a book, right?
Yes, I did. Here it is.
Let me see it. What do you got?
Holy Hacks, Everyday Ways to Live Your Faith and Get to Heaven.
Okay, so how did the title come up? Holy Hacks and all that stuff. Tell me about that.
It was a total God thing, because I've written a dozen books, and I was flying out to see my dad in Michigan, and the idea, Holy Hacks, jumped in my head. I thought, and I'm always looking for articles. I write for the National Catholic Register quite regularly. I also write for our Sunday Visitor, and I have a blog with the National Catholic Register. I actually was I won first place from the National Catholic Press Association in blogging last year. So I was surprised because I didn't even know I'd been entered. And I just, give all the glory to God, because when I started out in writing, it was more like, oh, I'm going to do this exciting thing, and oh, I'm going to be famous. And once I let go of that, and I used to write in the secular world. I even wrote for the National Enquirer for a while. And in right around that time, I was getting more serious about my faith, and I decided I wasn't going to sell my soul. I would just, do good writing. And I wrote for Woman's World for 10 years. But anyways, so I got into book writing kind of later in my life. I was like 40 years old, and actually 44 when the first book was published. And at this late stage in the game, the last 3 books I've written, people came to me. This started out as an article. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going around. So Holy Hack started out as an article for the National Catholic Register. And I was thinking along the lines of, life hacks. Life hacks are easy, clever ways to get things done. What about holy hacks? That, your eternal life is even more important. And so I look at different categories, from spiritual warfare to humility to not gossiping. And I did a chapter, many chapters, talking about what are ways that you can make small incremental changes so it doesn't turn your life upside down, except ultimately it will when you make these little changes. For instance, like I have a plant off to the side here. Somebody gave me a few years ago. Every time I water it, I say a prayer for that person. Just little things. Instead of getting mad at somebody in traffic, say a prayer for them. And I remind people that Jesus made a deal with us. He said, the measure with which you measure will be measured back to you. So if you realize, oh, this is an opportunity, and you actually are receiving as much as you're giving. So the book is loaded with little things that become big things.
Where can I get this book?
It's published by Ave Maria Press. You can get it anywhere. You can get it online. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at Ave Maria. You can ask your local bookstore to order it for you.
Great. And so let's back up here. So you're 40 years old. You start writing books. How many kids did you have in the house at that time?
Well, I think, Isaac was just born, so we had 8. We had 8. And I was going to say, the last 3 books, I just said, okay, God, I'm kind of done trying to push myself or like send proposals. I said, if you want me to do this, you're going to have to let me know. And so the last few books I've written, they've come to me. So this started out as an article, and a publisher said, hey, can you turn this into a book? So that's how it came to being. And here I was, a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling, and writing became a hobby. Because even though I had a master's in public administration and I worked in the field, I still always liked writing. And I think God made me for writing, because when I was in 2nd grade, I would write stories. And I did it as a hobby, and it grew into my main endeavor. And I at some point I said, okay, as I got more spiritual and more into my Catholic faith, I said, okay, I'm going to give my gift of writing back to you, because you gave it to me. And at that moment, everything I did for Woman's World had a spiritual element, like somebody was praying or they felt their angel was with them, and Woman's World would include that. And around that time, I just felt inspired to start writing Catholic books, something that I used to think was boring, being a religious writer. Everything else is boring compared to that now, because it is amazing the stories that are out there. I did the Amazing Grace book series with Jeff Cavins and Matt Pinto. And those were bestsellers. People would say over and over again that they couldn't put it down. I heard the most amazing stories, like from a woman being gored by a blue marlin to a woman that, her dad was in the mafia. Just all these amazing faith stories, everything under the sun. And I realized how exciting life actually is, that religious people aren't boring. They've tapped into something far greater than, and I'm not knocking secular writing. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that became my path, and it's been a very exciting one.
So tell me a little bit about, so young people that may be listening to this, tell me what kind of habits that you had back then, and maybe continue to this day or improved, that got you into the position where you were able to be that productive? So, for example, I mean, do you wake up early? Do you do a certain thing every day? What kind of disciplines do you have that help you in creating, these productions?
Well, one of the things is letting go of what you want and just saying, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And you will be surprised. You will go places you never expected. And just let your faith grow and follow that, but then do your best with what's ever in front of you. And that includes embracing failure, because sometimes, and I've talked about this before and I've written about it, that failure sometimes can be your greatest blessing, because it stops you from going where you thought you were going to go. And if something doesn't work out, well, okay, reassess what's going on here. What can you learn from this? And then you start to having doors close, other ones open, and wherever you go, do your best. Don't expect God to do everything for you, but kind of be in touch with that. Be in touch with the spiritual, so that it isn't just about the world. So that, why did I stop writing for the National Enquirer? Because it was just about the money and I didn't want to sell my soul. I didn't know that when I turned down an assignment, when I made that decision, by the end of the week, I was going to start writing for Woman's World for 10 years, and they paid the exact same. I didn't know that opportunity was going to present itself. But what I did know is I had to do the right thing. I wanted to start doing the right thing, and I wasn't going to compromise that. Even though the money was tempting, money was not going to drive my decisions. And they still don't. I mean, I still turn down things. I do marketing now, and there's some stuff that I just think, no, I'm not going to put my name on that. And so sometimes I do things for free because I'm passionate about it. And for instance, I write for CatholicMom.com. I write for a lot of different places, and they don't pay, but it's a beautiful gathering of Catholic women writers, and some work, some stay home, some are writers. And I ended up being on Fox and Friends because somebody stumbled into an article and they wanted to talk about older moms, and I had written about that. So there's going to be opportunities you never could have given yourself that will present themselves. So so that's part of answering your question is don't try to control everything, but do your best, look for opportunities, be humble. And by humble, I mean be humble the Mother Teresa way.
How so?
She had guts.
Yeah,
She
right.
wasn't afraid of anybody. She stood up before Clinton and Gore and their wives at the National Prayer Day breakfast and sat and talked about the importance of life and protecting the most vulnerable, the unborn. She wasn't afraid of anybody, but she was very humble. And by being humble, she said, I know who I am. And therefore, nobody can hurt you. Nobody can knock you off of a pedestal that you put yourself on. And being humble isn't saying, oh, this ugly thing, or, oh, I'm no good about that, because that is still self-focused. I have a whole chapter in Holy Hacks on humility. What is humility? It's celebrating your gifts because they're your God-given gifts. God tells us to, or Jesus told us to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. And so what do you have to do to love yourself is to celebrate your gifts, and you use them not just for yourself, but if you're using them to serve God and serve others, it's going to come back to you, and you're going to feel good about what you're doing. I didn't know when I turned down the National Enquirer, when I stopped working for them, I did not know there would be opportunities, but I stayed true to myself, and right around the corner became a new opportunity that worked out very well for me because I was able to work from home and write for Woman's World magazine. And so by staying true to yourself and doing your best and celebrating, when I won the first place award in blogging from the National Press Association, I was so excited, but I knew it wasn't just me. I knew that God had presented all these opportunities for me. So in celebrating yourself, you're celebrating God at the same time. The opposite is being prideful, trying to get ahead of everybody else, being jealous, and that is exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausting because it's a losing endeavor. You're always comparing yourself with others, and you're going to be better than some and worse than others. And it's like, just stop playing that game and be the best that God made you to be. And you become peaceful.
So tell me then, Patti, the I think we'll edit this part out because you kind of broke off a little bit there for a second. I think we had a North Dakota type thing happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let me ask you this question. So you say keep the focus away from yourself and then listen to what God wants you to do. Rather, I mean, when we say that you're our Father, we say, your will be done, and basically not ours. It's easy to say, very difficult to do. So what kind of habits do you have to be able to discern what God wants you to do rather than what you want to do?
There's only one way, and that is a strong prayer life, and you can't skip that, because when you develop a strong prayer life, you start to get an inner voice that is bigger than you. So I mentioned that we had 2 boys from Kenya. It wasn't my idea. I resisted, and I said, okay, we'll just pray about it. And Joash had no money. Joash and Calvin, they had no money. Calvin is the older. He could come to school in the United States. I didn't know that. He had no reason to think it was possible. He owned 2 pairs of pants, had no parents. His parents had both died of AIDS. And he was suffering from malnutrition, walking to school an hour a day each time.
How did you hear about Calvin?
A friend of ours he went out. Bismarck has a Kenyan mission where they would have people go out and serve at a Catholic area or a Catholic parish area. He was teaching at the Catholic school. Calvin's uncle paid for him the fees to go to the Catholic school. When Calvin was praying that prayer, he had never met an American. So what a ridiculous prayer that one day he could go to school in the United States, because he read a book and it was a novel, and a character in the novel went to school in the United States. So he began praying this ridiculous prayer. Ivan came home kind of on a sabbatical, was visiting different friends, and we said, hey, Ivan, we had him over for dinner. Is there anything you need? I was thinking, like a pair of good shoes or something. He said, well, as a matter of fact, I need somebody to take in a teenage boy. What do you think? Well, I mean, we could barely feed the ones we had. We said, and it was the type of thing we would have done because we were foster parents before. We ran a group home for delinquent boys. And I felt this great sense of relief because I could say no with a clear conscience. I said, you know what? Even if we wanted to, we can't afford it. He goes, yeah, I kind of knew that about you guys, but I kept asking people and they kept saying, what about the Armstrongs? Have you asked them? They already have 8. What's one more? They won't even know the difference, which is true.
Yeah.
Coming from a big family, that's actually kind of true. It's easier to bring in one more when you have a lot. So then he said, wait a minute, what if I asked some people if they would help with his expenses? Would you take him in? He didn't even have a birth certificate at that point. So we said, okay, we'll pray about it. We had so many hurdles. He needed to get a birth certificate. We needed to become his legal guardian, so insurance would cover him. So we were as much as parents as with our other children. The Catholic school, high school, had to agree to take him in without tuition, without adding to the tuition we were already paying. So hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, he got through. 2 weeks before he came, Ivan emailed me and said he just got his visa. He'll be there in 2 weeks. He got his passport and his visa. And I'm not kidding. I dropped to my knees and I said, okay, Blessed Mother, you're going to have to help me.
Yeah, you've broken up a little bit. The message isn't going through. Are you there still, Patti? Right in the middle of your great story, darn it. We may have to restart this. This is one of the glitches I told you about, because you're kind of still frozen. I think what we're going to do, Patti, is we're going to restart this. So why don't we do this? Why don't you sign off? Yeah.
And I think that, okay, Joseph?
Yeah, so it broke off. So I think we must have some sort of, there must be some sort of short circuits every now and then. So you were talking about Calvin and you went to your knees.
Well, okay. By the time we got through all the hoops, we became his legal guardians. He had to get permission. He had to get a visa and passport. So Ivan said he'll be there, emailed me and said he's going to be there in 2 weeks. And I dropped to my knees and I said, okay, Blessed Mother, you're going to need to help me be a mother to this boy who
Yeah, so it's happening again. So I'm wondering if you have a bad internet connection. So why don't you try one more time, hanging up, and then try one more time. And then we'll see how it goes. Maybe, I don't know whether your internet's overloaded or what. If there's other people on the internet at your place. In any event, why don't you're all frozen again. So sorry about, I don't know whether your story doesn't want to get out or what. But.
goes on my phone.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, so I don't know what the deal is. I don't know what's going on, because every time you start telling that story, it's such a great story, and you get on your knees and you're asking the Blessed Mother, and all of a sudden it goes boom.
So maybe we need to ask her to help us here.
That's right. Blessed Mother, please let us get through this interview. All right, here we go. Go for it.
Okay, so after we got through all the hurdles of birth certificate, we had to become his legal guardian. We had to have the school give him a scholarship. There were so many different hurdles, including getting a visa, which is not easy, from Kenya to the United States, because it's considered a terrorist country, and his passport. So Ivan sent me an email and said he got his visa. He'll be there in 2 weeks. So I dropped to my knees and I said, okay, Blessed Mother, you're going to have to help me be a mother to this boy who I've never met, because I knew I had to be as much a mother to him as to our boys. Well, if Ivan would have written me and said, oh, it turns out he's not going to come after all, I would have been glad. I would have said, whew, I don't have to go through with this. But let me tell you, it was the best thing we ever did. He is such a beloved member of our family. And it was so much fun because he's the same age as our son, Tyler. And then 3 years later, his brother, Joash, came. So we had 4 in high school at once. I had 5 teenagers at once. And it was the best thing our family ever did. It added so much. And
so how old were these boys when they came to your house?
Like 13, 14. They started out. Now, Calvin was easy. He was a breeze. He was just a good kid. Joash, oh my gosh. I thought, he doesn't need a mother. He needs a probation officer. What have we done? He was tough. And Ivan at one point said, you know what? You tried your best. Send him back. And I thought, oh, I just can't do that. But we were tempted. But he came to us and he said, hey, can you give me one more chance? And he started going to the chapel. What I realized is he was only 8 years old when his mother died. And and his grandfather said to him, you're evil just like your mother was. And it's like he was not treated well. He had it tough. And so he had a tough exterior. He came here with that attitude and he was tough. And so after maybe 7 months or so, he came in the summer. He was a freshman in high school. He was doing horrible in high school, and he tested at it between a 7th grade and a 1st grade level, and he wasn't even trying. And I thought, he's not even going to graduate high school. Why are we doing this? He doesn't appreciate it. And of course, we were all praying. And he said, can you give me one more chance? I stopped at the chapel today at school, and I'm going to try harder. And he did. He started. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but at least he was trying. And then something happened to totally change his life.
What was that?
He found out he could run. he had gone out for soccer. He didn't even know he could run. He had 2 horrible, humiliating experiences in his life running. He tripped and fell, and everybody laughed at him, and he said, I'm never going to run again. But he kind of, like a year or 2 later, he wanted to run. So he entered a race, and he thought he was doing well. And one of the officials pulled him out, and they said, you're out of here. He didn't know it was a walking race, and he was running. So he's like, I'm done with this. So he went out for soccer. So his freshman year of high school, we had our 2 older boys, Calvin and Calvin and Tyler were in track, and Jacob, who was his age, went out for track. So he said, okay, I'm going to go out. And he blew everybody away because he could run. And, you know, by his senior year, he broke every cross country except for that one. And he was amazing. And he didn't even know he could run. And that changed his life. He used to say, why is everybody cheering for me? I was at one track meet, and I just had tears in my eyes because I was at the top. We live near the track, and he'd call us right before his event instead of, you know, like you spend 8 hours at track meets.
Yeah, right.
And so we had little kids at home. So we started going out there right before his event, and I was standing, we could see the stadium down below. So I had a bird's eye view, and he was running, and he was in the lead the whole time. You'd think, no, don't take the lead so quick, but he had the lead. And I just had tears in my eyes because the whole stadium was cheering and yelling, Joash, Joash. And I thought, they have no idea. They just think, wow, he's doing really well. He's a good runner. They have no idea what this means to him. Because this is a boy who felt once his mother died, he said, now there's nobody to love me. His story is an amazing grace for families, by the way. I included it, sat down and interviewed him, and got to know his story way more than I realized. Because he felt, when I said, Josh, can I tell your story? By then, he had really turned his life around. By the way, he graduated on the honor roll. This boy who was getting bad grades, bad attitude, and tested at a first grade level in some areas in English. He ended up with a scholarship for running, but he also was on the honor roll. And wow. I thought, and I said, can I sit down? I want to include your story in Amazing Grace for Families. And he said, Mom, I don't want everyone to know what a loser I am. And I said, Josh, are you serious? And so I understood it was such an important point in his life and our life. I said, Josh, you were a little kid. You know, he used to sell the family corn and trade it for beer. And they're like, what's happening to our corn? We're starving. They have one other older brother. And so the grandfather stepped in to find out what is happening to our family corn. And he was just criticized and treated harshly by relatives. So of course he didn't, he acted up. And I said, Josh, you were just a little kid. You did what any little kid would have done. And the important thing is he turned it around in a big way.
So I'm getting a little bit of a nature versus nurture vibe here. So the Calvin and Joash story tells me there's a little bit to the nurture.
They had 2 parents that loved them. And Calvin did very well. He was a beloved member. And it was just, we hung in there for them. And because I worked in the field of social work, I know there's no guarantees. A lot of people think you love these stories where you bring in a foster child or you adopt a child and it has a happy ending. They don't all have happy endings.
No, I get that. I've seen that. I've seen a lot of bad endings. Trust me.
But it doesn't mean that you taking them in and loving them isn't important and worthwhile. But you got to go in with your eyes wide open. And Joash, he was very much loved by his mother and father, and he had to get past the hurt. And he had to bring those walls down. And it took a while, and it wasn't easy. And they didn't just go down overnight. There is that nurturing. And there's also, he went to St. Mary's High School, and it was a good school. And he had a friend who was in track and cross country. Well, he ended up running cross country then for the public school because we didn't have a cross country team. And they had an amazing coach. Coach Anderson. So there is a lot of nurture because he was placed in an environment where he was loved and supported and taken care of. And he started out in that same kind of environment too. He was
Yeah, so Calvin, tell me where his story is now.
He will be, he's doing an extra year fellowship at Duke University. He's an anesthesiologist. He decided to do an extra year of residency in infectious diseases. He graduated from University of Mary in respiratory therapy. He met his wife there, who was also a respiratory therapist. He will be coming back to Bismarck and working at St. Alexius Hospital. And he's just a very humble, hardworking. The relatives always loved Calvin because he always did the right thing. He was just a good kid. But this is the story that touched my heart. Evan didn't like him. After his parents died, he used to hang around the hospital a lot. And Evan said, I didn't think that was good for him. I said, you need to stop doing that. And so he did eventually. And after he'd been with us for a couple of years, I said, Calvin, why did you used to hang around the hospital all the time? And he said, because I didn't want to sit around feeling sorry for myself. And I knew there were people worse off than me. So I'd go to the hospital and help them. I thought, wow, he was just a teenage boy. And I say that Calvin came to us part teenager and part adult. And Josh came to us part teenager, part little kid. He loved cartoons and just, but in the end, he ended up probably bonding with us even closer because he was just a kid at heart. But he did have a good heart.
Yeah. And so Calvin is a medical doctor now?
Yes, he is.
Wow. That's a great story. And then Joash ended up in the Marines, and he's gone through the Marines now, hasn't he?
He's a controller. He works for the government, and he's getting his master's in business right now. And when there were colleges recruiting him and he was getting together his shoes and going to practice for cross country, I said, Josh, could you have ever imagined your life being like this now? He said, not in a million years.
Oh, that is wonderful. I love these stories.
When I talk about embracing failure, how many stories do you start with failure or hardship and there's beautiful endings?
So, Patti, on a personal note, maybe you could tell us some defining moments in your life that were key to you making big decisions about where you're going to go.
Well, the one I mentioned, the National Enquirer, I was doing something that wasn't consistent with my values. But also when we lived in Montana, Mark was an award-winning broadcaster. He won the Associated Press Award. NBC had called him out to cover a plane crash for Sioux City, Iowa. And then lo and behold, a small local radio station laid him off. So here we've got failure. And it became a huge turning point in our life because we were, hit and miss on our faith. And we said, you know what, we're going to put ourselves in God's hands and say, okay, you decide where you want us to go. And he would apply places and they would say, you know what, you did so well. I shouldn't tell you this, but you're a definite shoo-in. And then he wouldn't get the job. And for the first time in our life, we said, okay, then it's not where God wanted us. Well, lo and behold, he had 1 month of unemployment left. He gets a call from Bismarck, North Dakota, somebody in radio who said, I heard that you're looking for work and that you've won all these awards and somebody recommended you and I'm looking for somebody. And, when Mark told me about the phone call and we thought, oh my gosh, we're going to Bismarck, North Dakota. I wasn't excited about it, but this has been such a good place. What we were praying? We were praying for a good place to raise our family and where we would grow spiritually. This has been such a good place. At the time, it was pretty good, but we had a shortage of priests, and now we are one of the top places for seminarians. This place has just really been transformed since we got here in 30 years. Lots and lots of young priests. They're kid magnets. They seem to attract more kids into the seminaries. And so our vocation director once said, if the Archdiocese of Detroit had per capita Catholic seminarians that we have, they would need over 300. So this has been a good place. So that turning point was Mark losing his job. And it became one of the best things possible. You know, the turning point, and our boys from Kenya, it was horrible that their parents died. They were suffering from malnutrition. But now look at how successful they are. And so it seems every time, okay, let's talk about COVID. How many people? Yes, there has been a lot of sadness, and I'm not going to try to minimize that. There's been hardship, there's been sadness. But how many people do you hear? Somebody just emailed me and said, COVID, where have you been all my life? Because they're 4 teenagers, some who are adopted, that they were having trouble with, and they live on a farm. They are having this amazing family experience, and it's the best they've ever experienced. And so, and you know, you're doing these Zoom podcasts that you're reaching people in new ways that you haven't before. And so I just think everything seems to have a silver lining. And we have a priest in our diocese, Monsignor Thomas Richter, who calls it this is your holy place, he tells people, because it's when everything else is taken away and it's just you and God, you know, all of a sudden you've cleared out the things that have been getting in the way, causing you pitfalls and hurdles. And that's when you're really going to hear the voice of God and say, okay, now where do we go from here?
Tell me some meaningful people in your life that have been, you know, people that basically, you know, sat you down or basically looked you in the eye and said, hey, Patti, you know what? Maybe this is something that you want to consider doing other than what you were doing, or somebody that inspired you. I mean, I know there's probably thousands of those. I mean, obviously, you know, growing up, our parents are that way, and other folks, but are there any people that stand out in your life?
I can say that I never had like a mentor per se. Ivan, who was teaching in Kenya from our diocese and the one that sent the boys to us, I looked up to him a lot because he was a simple, humble man. Mother Teresa. I write for Legatus magazine, and I recently interviewed 3 women who are highly successful CEOs in their own business, in entrepreneurs and founders of their own businesses. And I got a lot out of talking with them. And we came up with, you know, tips for others. And not only did I tell their stories, but I share those tips with a son of mine who immediately started taking them into action. And I realized they were how to succeed no matter what you do, whether you're in business, and they were in business, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, that it's, you know, things like do what you say you're going to do, be on time, get your work done. And I don't care if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're the head of a corporation, do what you say you're going to do, be on time. And my husband would laugh at that because he thinks I'm late everywhere, but I'm just not as early as he is.
Yeah. So now you're getting to be a somewhat empty nester. Give me what's going to happen in the next 5 years with Patti Armstrong.
You know, even though I've gone to movie junkets where I've met Hollywood celebrities, and I travel a little here and there, but not a whole lot, because I don't like to be gone. Even though my kids are older and they would go, Mom, go, we don't care. Like, I care. Yeah. So that's why I want to start doing podcasts. It's funny now that I'm a little bit more open to traveling more. I have traveled a little here and there. Well, there's not a whole lot of traveling that's going to go on for the near future. So we'll see what that looks like. And I just have more time to, I have kind of been working my way into this with my son, our youngest in high school. I have had a lot of time to myself, but we have grandkids now, and I visit them a lot. But when I visit them, I can still work at the same time. Really, writing has been perfect for me because I can write, and I am kind of an ambitious person. I like to do well. So I'm just going to be doing more of what I'm already doing, really.
Okay, so I know that we have Holy Hacks that was just published, and which I'm going to go buy immediately. Right after this, I'm going to get on Amazon. I'm going to order Holy Hacks, and then I'm probably going to send it to you to get signed, and then give me one more secret Holy Hack. And then I'm going to get with that back here. And then,
Joseph, I'm going to sign you a copy and mail it to you. The copy you buy from Amazon, you give as a gift to someone.
I will do that. But I want to know I want to know the secret sauce here, Patti, because you're living a life that is meaningful. And I know that, I've read a bunch of books on St. Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa. And, people would always go up to her and say, Mother Teresa, I want to help. I want to do this type of things. And she'd always say, go home and love your family. That was her number one thing. And then whenever people would say, thank you, thank you, thank you, she'd always, take them to the chapel and she'd point to the crucifix and say, everything that I have comes from God. Every gift I have comes from God. And it's that sense of just gratitude that she had for all the grace that God had given her and the ability to be able to communicate and to lead and those types of things. I think that's probably what you got from those CEOs that you interviewed, is that they understood that everything that we have is a gift from God. And then once you internalize that, and once you have the understanding that, in my belief is that the biggest epidemic in America is loneliness. And, one of the things that my mom always taught me was that, you're never alone, that God's always with you. And so that's good. And so if we can express that somehow to people, and that for them to understand that not only are you in God's hands all the time, but your kids are too, and to take some of the pressure off of you, that you have to do all these things for your kids, when you have to understand God has them in their hands, and your job is to listen to God as to what's right for them. Yes. But they have to listen too. Yes. I mean, this is all stuff that I think we're going to get from reading those books of yours.
Oh, in a big way. Like the whole Amazing Grace series they're amazing stories of God working in people's lives. And they're great stories even for people that aren't Catholic, like Amazing Grace for Mothers and Amazing Grace for Families, because there's no preaching. It's like you're witnessing these amazing stories of what happens through the grace of God. Holy Hacks is my secret sauce, because it's everything from a whole chapter on gratitude. Mother Teresa is featured in there. The saints are featured in there. Jesus is featured in there. And then I also have a whole chapter on a lot of famous people like Father Don Calloway and Catherine G. Lopez and Abby. What am I drawing a blank? Abby, Planned Parenthood.
Oh yeah. We just call her Abby. That's good.
Yep, Abby. So, anyways, I want to know what their holy hacks are, and so they shared with me. But it's amazing how your life can be transformed. I talked about my dad in '94 and now he was an example. I should have said, who was a big example to you? My dad and my mom had a lot of good sayings, like she would say, "Is this going to matter 100 years from now?" Just to get things in perspective. But I like what you said about taking the pressure off yourself, and especially as a parent. We feel like, this is our most important job, but so many of us expect that we have to do it. We have to make them believe this. We have to make them think this. We have to make them succeed. And we need to take a step back and work in union with God. And it takes so much of the pressure off of us. And so that we're doing our best, and we're going to keep doing our best even when they leave home. But we just keep putting them in God's hands and stop thinking that we can control everything.
Yeah, one of the things that I try to get practical somewhat with, my generation and this coming generation or the coming generations. And, I agree with you that not the preaching part, is just the practical part of having a faith in God, is that, for example, I try and say, listen, you're a coach, you're a coach or a player coach of a basketball team, and you have 12 people on the bench. Why wouldn't you want to pull God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ and all the saints off the bench and have them help you in your life? Because what's the downside? I remember St. Augustine always talking about that that God is like a hound that will constantly pursue you, constantly pursue you. And all you have to do is turn around and say, yes, I will accept your help and your grace. And that's it. And so I always tell these folks, listen, how great is your life? How great is your life that you couldn't accept the help of grace of God in your help? And then it makes your life so much easier.
It really does. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite holy hacks. If I travel on a plane or I go anywhere, I always say, okay, God, you decide who I sit next to, and you direct our conversation. Well, I can't tell you the number of times I've been told it must have been meant to be that you sat next to me. And usually they're the ones that drive the conversation, where these amazing things happen. And I know other people that do that too. So basically you just sign up, say, okay, God, you decide where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do, and you direct everything, and you will be amazed how your life suddenly you start to see you feel and experience his presence, even if it's who you sit next to and how your conversations go. And then life, instead of you trying to drive it, it becomes an adventure, a fun one too.
Yeah, and we'll close this up. So I try and tell that to folks. I said, listen, you do not run into people in life for no reason. And you're either going to be a plus to them or you're going to be a minus to them. So why don't we always focus on trying to be a plus to those folks, do a lot of listening. And my mom always said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Just make sure you at least twice as much listen than speak. And so that's always been a good recipe for me because, at my house, it's better to listen to what's going on there than to do a lot of speaking, but just, do the St. Francis thing, which is, go to town and preach, but if necessary, use words, right, Patti?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So anyway, so thank you so much. I hope this is one of the first of many conversations that we have, and I'll be praying for you that your podcast and video cast, they call them, will take off, and that you will be able to interview all these great people and then put them on video so that people can watch them on iTunes or YouTube or whatever.
Well, this is a prime example. I said, okay, Lord, if you want me to do this, you're going to have to send somebody to help me, give me advice. And then you, at the very beginning, before we started recording, said, if you need any help, I can help you. So it's like, wow, you've been sent by God.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much. And listen, I'm really looking forward to reading your books, and I follow your blogs and, the National Catholic Register and Holy Hacks and all these different books. Just Google Patti Maguire Armstrong or just Patti Armstrong, and you'll find all of her great stuff. Keep it up. Just keep the daily stuff up, will you, Patti?
Oh, thanks. This has been such a joy. I know we'll be in touch with each other.
All right. Take care, Patti.
Thanks. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the opening statement with Joe Shannon. You can find us on the internet at shannonlawgroup.com or telephone our office at 312-578-9501. Have a terrific day.